Hello and welcome to this month's webinar entitled A Collector's Point of View here with Family Life Credit Services. We're just delighted that you guys could all attend and be with us today. Before we get started, I would just like to open up a quick word of prayer. So we ask, Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this day, Lord. We thank you for Family Life Credit Services, for Jeremy coming in today and talking to our clients. And we just pray that you're with us as we go through this time, that we can get information out to help others, Lord, that need the help and education to climb out of the debt they're dealing with. And we ask these things in your name today. Amen. All right, well, thanks again, everyone. Just to jump right into it, I'm going to pass this over to Jeremy, and he's going to go through this information. Afterwards, if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to give us a call, or you can shoot us an email, and we'll have that information for you at the end of the webinar. Again, thanks so much.
Good morning. My name is Jeremy, and I just wanted to, Gerald asked me if I could come out and help with today's webinar. Just to give you a little bit of a background of my experience before I get into this. I was in the collection industry for about almost 5 years. Worked my way up within a very large collection agency out in Minneapolis, and worked my way up and eventually became a psych director before I decided to let the business go, and now I'm in a totally different line of work in the banking world. But anyways, I have some inside information, and the biggest thing that I really want to convey is that the information I'm presenting today is not legal advice, but just ideas and suggestions on how to handle collection accounts. The first thing I really want to talk about with the collection industry is, when do accounts go into collections? And there are so many different collection agencies that are out there. The first thing, when account goes into collections, when someone comes into hard times and is not able to make payments on their accounts, they do try to work with their creditors to make payments. But basically, what happens is, on the way that it reports on the credit reporting agency is that every time that you have an account, a credit card is called a revolving account, and every time that you make a payment on time, your account is considered an R1. You miss a payment, you go to R2. You miss another payment, you go to R3. It's considered in the credit world. Once you hit an R6, which means 6 months in default, the collection agency, or the creditor, has the right to put it in collections. Now, will they always put it in collections once it hits an R6? No, they do not. It will really depend on the actual creditor themselves. But normally, when it hits an R6, they'll automatically put it into collections. Beforehand, they will give you a notice letting you know that they will be put into collections. They have to, when they contact you, they cannot threaten you that they're going to put in collections and then not put it in there. So they do have to follow through. So when you do receive correspondence, they will follow through and put it in collections. Now, in the collection world, there are different types of collection agencies. They call them basically first tier, second tier, third tier, fourth tier, and so on. First tier is once it goes into collection. So that they consider it paper, and that paper is very liquid for the collection agency. Just for the fact that someone may have forgot or didn't notice, or a collection agency contacts them, an individual then will pay it right away. So it's very liquid at that time. As the debt gets older, it may go from one collection agency to another collection agency, and that will vary depending on the creditor. The next thing that I want to talk about is how does this affect my credit score? Well, once you hit it into an R6, you're in collections. It's already hit your credit report a total of 6 times that you've been late. So once it goes into collections, it does impact it, but the biggest impact is once you're late. Now, in my banking industry, I do pull credit, and I pulled credit on an individual that had a simple retail card, was making payments on time, and initially I pulled their credit, and their credit score was over 700. They had one late payment on that retail card when I had to pull their credit a second time. And it literally was 30 days late, and that time their score dropped from 700 down to around 630. The biggest impact is right away. So that it does affect your credit score. Can you increase your credit score? Yes, you can, by making payments, by taking care of that specific debt. It will over time increase your credit score. The next thing about collections is who owns the debt. That will vary based upon the tier. When I conveyed earlier, you got Tier 1, you got Tier 2, Tier 3, Tier 4, depending on the stage of the debt and the collection agency. Normally, the creditor, once it goes into collections, normally the creditor will hire a collection agency to collect on their debt. And when they hire it, they're paying them a fee to collect this debt. And so, or if the creditor is big enough where they don't want to handle it, or even if they're small enough they don't want to handle it, they will sell the debt off. So if you currently are in collections, you may receive notice from a separate collection agency that you may not even recognize, and they may have either bought the debt or they may actually be representing them. Now, the collection agency that I worked for is we represented the debt. We represented big companies that were out there. We had billions of dollars of debts coming in and out of the door. We were the back end, so we were the Tier 5, Tier 6 collection agency. And I've been in the collections for 2, 3, 4 years, and that paper is considered harder to collect. But with that paper itself, with that debt, we represented them, and to give an inside information, we actually had a contract with these agents or with these creditors, and whatever we collected, we normally would receive anywhere, depending on the contract, anywhere from 25 to 60% of that debt. So if a person owed $1,000 and we collected all 1,000, we'd receive anywhere from 25 to 60% of that debt. In regards to how a collector will contact a consumer, there are laws that we have to, that the collection agency has to follow by, and that law is called the Fair Debt Credit Protection Act. And the Fair Debt Credit Protection Act was put in place in 1977 by the Federal Trade Commission. If you Google Fair Debt Credit Protection Act, you will actually be able to print out a you just Google it, the first one that will pop up is an Adobe Acrobat that will actually convey what the law is. And it's there to protect consumers out there from frivolous companies that are breaking the law and trying to collect a debt, because consumers as themselves have rights and are not to be harassed by a collection agency. The Fair Debt Protection Act is, again, I'm not giving legal advice. You'll need to talk to a legal attorney on it, but basically there are some things that a collection agency can and cannot do. The first thing is the mini Miranda. When a collection agency gets in contact with a consumer, they are to give them mini Miranda, which states that this is an attempt to collect a debt and any information obtained will be used for that purpose. They have to disclose that every time that a phone call is made or any type of letter is made. If they are not, they are breaking the Fair Debt Credit Protection Act, which gives the consumer the right to go ahead and throw a lawsuit against them. When can a collector call? Each state does have a different law. The normal law that's out there is 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. They do vary from state to state, but technically they are not to call you before 9 a.m. So if you are called before 9 a.m. or 9 p.m., you are being harassed, and you are protected underneath the Fair Debt Protection Act, so that harassment doesn't happen. Can collectors harass you? Absolutely not. I mean, they're going to contact, and a part of, when I was in the industry, we worked the back end stuff. So this stuff had been 3 or 4 years old. We actually had settlements. We had contracts with these different creditors that were out there, and we would have authorization to take 50, 60% off the debt. And as we all know, the debt may be $1,000 that's being reported what's owed, but technically the debt itself may have been $200 to $300. Then you add all the collection fees, and you add all the late fees, and you add everything else that's on top of it. which brings it up to $1,000. So by bringing it down to 50%, that debt can be negotiated. And the negotiation, again, will depend on the collection agency and what tier it is in, Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, Tier 4, Tier 5. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. But collectors cannot harass you. They can contact you if you are at work and you advise them that you're at work and it's affecting your job. They cannot contact you at work. Can a collection agency threaten to sue you? Yes, they can. But they cannot threaten to sue you and then not follow through. So if you do receive a letter stating that they are going to pursue action and going to throw a judgment against you or sue you, and they do not follow through in the time period that they state, that again is harassment, and that is illegal practice underneath the Fair Debt Credit Protection Act. Again, it's material that that is, if you are in a position, that it doesn't hurt to read, but it's there to protect you. But what I just discussed is pretty much all in a nutshell in regards to that. If you receive letters and phone calls and you want them to stop, can you have them stop without paying the debt? And yes, you can. You can have them. You can cease and desist further communication. And how you would pursue on cease and desisting is that they would require it in writing. And so my recommendation, working in the industry, is if you're going to send a letter of cease and desisting or even disputing it, I would highly recommend to send that via certified mail for the fact that to show proof that they actually received that. Because I've seen things in the industry where they state that they may have never seen it, and of course they would continue the practice, and it would be hard to prove that that they actually did receive it without having certified mail.
Jeremy, I just want to jump in and let people know too that, you know, when they do call you at work, you can send a cease and desist letter to have them stop calling you at work. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, absolutely. Yep. There was tactics that we would try to find from neighbors if we couldn't get a hold of a person. They call it skip tracing in the industry, where they'll try to find, when you fill out an application, they'll ask for the nearest relative. The reason they ask for the nearest relative is so that they can contact them and say, hey, I need to get a hold of so-and-so. Could you please give me a number where I can reach them at? That was the whole purpose behind underneath the application of where is your nearest relative. But there was different skip tracing. They cannot disclose any information of why they're calling, but that was an annoying factor for consumers, so they would, you know, contact the collection agency. But at that time, you can ask, once you get a hold of them, you can have them cease and desist for all further communication. But again, you would need to put that in writing to stop that. The next thing I want to talk about is how can you stop collection calls and letters without paying the debt. That's exactly what I just talked about. But the biggest thing in regards to is negotiating with collection agencies. When is the best time to call? How do settlements work? Really, what it boils down to is that we have these contracts, and depending on the tier that you were in, if it was just in the collections or if it's been in collections for 2 or 3 or 4 years, the newer the debt is, the tougher it was to settle. So if it had been just in the collections and you wanted to try to settle this debt to take care of it, more than likely they were only going to offer 10%, 10 to 20% off the debt. If you were in Tier 2, Tier 3, Tier 4, it was tougher to collect, so the creditor was more willing to negotiate on that. Also, be aware that that you may receive a letter and cease and desist your communication from one collection agency, so they send it back to the creditor. Then that creditor then will send it to a new collection agency, and at that time they'll contact you, and you've got to go through this process all over again, which can be a headache. There is statute limitations. Each state is different, so I can't disclose in regards to what state you're in to be able to convey that, but the statute limitations range anywhere from 6 years all the way up to 10. The average is 7 to 10 years is the statute of limitations, which means that at that time that they no longer can collect on that debt. There was locally here a collection agency and attorney's office that did try collecting on a debt that was past the statute of limitations. They ended up getting sued, and they ended up losing in the Supreme Court appeal, and had to pay a hefty fine for that. So again, the statute of limitations is 7 years from the time that it charges off. And when I talk about charge-off, that was considered the R6 once it goes into collections. So it's 7 years from that date itself. But it was very common for, and you may have seen this, you may not, but it's very common for collection agencies to move the paper from one agency to another agency to another agency, because every time it got moved, it was the liquidity was a little bit easier, and so that's the reason why collection agencies do move the paper with that. Getting back to negotiating with collection agencies, when's the best time to call and how do settlements work? The best time to call is at the end of the month. When we're in the collection industry, it wasn't like I always dreamed to be in the collection world. It happened to fall in my lap, and at that time, it was a sales position. I earned a commission off of what I brought in the door. So the more I collected, the more money I made as an individual, which is the best time to do it is at the end of the month. And the reason it is because we all had goals towards the end of the month on how much we were to collect. So we were given an amount of business, amount of paper. With that paper, it could be anywhere from, depending on what tier of collection agency it was. But the newer the debt, you'd have maybe 250 accounts that you would collect on for 60 to 90 days. The older the debts, you could have a couple thousand in your pipeline that you were trying to collect on, and you would earn a commission. And so we were more willing to negotiate with a better deal at the end of the month for the fact that that could help reach our goal, which would be able to help, which would help the bottom line on the commission. How do settlements work? Settlements work basically with a contract with that creditor. If you are going to settle, get it in writing. Do not accept anything over accept an agreement over the phone. Get it faxed to you. Get it emailed to you. Get a letter in writing. It is very, very important because I've seen so many papers that come into the collection agency I used to work for, and you would see the balances owed on it and say it was $600 and we were trying to collect, and let's just say the original balance was $1,400, and then the consumer calls and says, well, I accepted the settlement for $800, and that's the difference, and all of a sudden I've got the part that was supposed to be written off. Well, that collection agency didn't report it properly. There's not very few collection agencies that do a lot of bad business. There are some, but there's a lot of people, a lot of collection agencies out there that are reputable in that aspect of it, but you want to protect yourself as a consumer to get it in writing to make sure that it gets settled out so that you could actually send it to the actual credit reporting agencies if you'd like to show proof that that settlement was accepted at the dollar amount that the collection agency and you had accepted. If there are hardships that are involved, collection agencies will actually take a look at those. I mean, I've settled out where I've had a $10,000 debt, and we settled out at 30 cents on the dollar. So it was a $3,000 transaction. There was hardship with medical and a variety of other things, and so we received a letter from the client, and the best time to do it is towards the end of the month because that $3,000 is extra money that goes into the collector's pocket, which they earn a commission off of, which can help get the settlement actually through. So we do have called regular settlements, the settlements where the contract's 50, 60, 40% off, but we can actually go, we call it flow blanket settlements, where we can go below further than what actually than what our contract states.
And I just wanted to kind of touch again with you, Jeremy. It's such a good point on having, collection agencies, creditors send you information through the mail so that you can make copies. You can have basically a paper trail so that when the debt is paid off, you can go back, check your credit report to make sure that it's showing a zero balance. If it's not, you have paper to prove to the 3 major credit bureaus that you have, in fact, taken care of that debt. So I'm really happy you touched on that. It's really good.
Correct. In the settlement, the biggest question is, do I settle or do I pay in full? Really, it's up to the consumer and what they want. You got to realize that the creditor has added all these collection fees on top of it, which we know that if we got a $2,000 balance, that original balance had to be no more than $800-900, and everything they add up onto it. When you settle out, it does get reported on your credit reporting agency as settled in full. Does that negatively impact you? I can't answer that if it negatively impacts you compared to paid in full. Being on the banking side, if I see a collection account, I look to see if it's been paid, zero balance. We don't look to see if it's settlement in full. We don't look if it's paid in full. But what I think would really affect it, and I'm not 100% sure on this, is going to be your credit score. If you do pay the balance in full, it could benefit your credit score more, but I am not 100% sure on that. So, the biggest question I always got, should I settle in full, should I pay it in full? Well, as a collection agency, we would like to pay it in full because we're going to collect more on it. So if you get an opinion from a collector, they're going to, of course, tell you to pay it in full because they're going to earn more off of it. But when an account has been settled, on the banking side, when I take a look at it, it doesn't negatively impact it one way or the other in regards to that. So.
That's interesting. That's really interesting because usually, we've heard that on credit reports it'll show that the debt was settled for less than what was actually owed, and that we've kind of been told that it's a negative impact. It's great hearing this from a lender, stating that we don't necessarily look at that. That's excellent.
What we do look at, though, is the credit score, and so it could negatively impact the credit score, which then it could affect the loan application itself. So our loan application is based upon literally the credit score and then how much debt a person has and how much income they have. So
right, and you're basically saying, free up as much debt as you have, get rid of that debt. Whether or not you settle it, get it off of there, show zero balances.
Correct.
Yeah.
But in the collection world, everyone is a human being. There are some people that are more aggressive than others. I'm still friends with the individuals that were collectors or still collectors, and there's some very, very good individuals that are collecting because they're just doing their job, but then there's also some that are that do give the industry a bad name out there, and that's why the FDCPA is into effect to protect consumers. So those individuals are no longer doing business. We had people that did break the FDCPA at our agency, and if they did break it, they were fired. So it wasn't accepted. It wasn't worth a lawsuit that was out there. But again, it's something that they are willing to work out with you. Some collection agencies do like monthly payments. Some don't. So if you ask why won't they accept monthly payment, well, the reason it is because if they're collecting $25 or $40 on an account, and the balance is $4,000, it's going to take forever to pay that, and it's going to get moved from one. If they don't collect the entire balance, it's going to get moved to a different collection agency. So and plus the collector will want to try to get paid because they'll earn commission off of it. So that's the reason that some collection agencies do not like to make monthly payments. Okay. Any other questions, Gerald?
I think that's it. Was that the end of the presentation?
Yes, it was.
Excellent. I just wanted that to kind of pop up so that anybody has any questions or concerns, please feel free to call the 1-800 number, or you can email Gerald at familylifecredit.org. I just want to thank you, Jeremy, so much for coming in and talking with our clients here at Family Life. Again, please feel free to give us a phone call or shoot me an email with any question concerns. Thank you so much for your time, and have a blessed day.